Okay, so this is part 3 of the lecture on the First Estate. The Gregorians. Okay, so basically Pope Gregory and all of the staff that he put into place in Rome had all come up through the Cluniac system and were very keen on reforming the church. And they did reform it, but in some ways they got distracted and they got very concerned with politics, okay? They wanted to free the church from any kind of secular control. All right, that was their number one priority. They figured they couldn't get to any kind of reform until the church was free from secular control. And not only that, they wanted to centralize the church more. They wanted the Pope to be giving orders and for those orders to be obeyed by all the bishops. So bishops were going to lose some of their independence. And then finally, they wanted, and some of them in their more fevered dreams, they wanted the Pope to act as a kind of king of Europe, where the Pope would give orders to kings and the kings would obey the Pope. And that is how the world was supposed to run. Essentially, the days of the Franco-Papal alliance were long past. Okay, Charlemagne had won the right to name his bishops. The church says there's no way that you should be naming bishops. You should not be selling the offices in any event. Okay, the church will name its own bishops. Thank you very much. If there's any money to be made, the church will be making that. Okay. And so this came to a head in something that historians call the investiture conflict. Okay, so when a man was made a bishop, the king would be there and would present him with the symbols of his office, the symbols being the staff and a ring. Okay, so a staff, there's on the left there is a king presenting a man with a tonsure there. He's presenting him with a staff, which looks like a shepherd's crook, because the bishop is the shepherd of his people. So a bishop gets that kind of a staff, and there's a modern picture of medieval staff. He would also present the new bishop with a ring. Okay, generally it's like one of those massive class rings or a Super Bowl ring with a big amethyst in it. That was the bishop's stone. So that's the bishop would carry a staff in one hand and ring on the other. And you think, well, that's not a big deal. What's the big deal? He has to get them from someone. Well, the answer there is, in the Middle Ages, gesture has legal significance. And if the king is presenting these things to a bishop, it basically suggests that the king is making the bishop. And the Pope cannot stand that. If anyone's going to be presenting something to a churchman, it's going to be another churchman. It's not going to be a king. So this is what leads to one of the more remarkable scenes in medieval history. Okay? There was a great, Gregory VII, he was very reform-minded, very headstrong, but so also was the emperor, Henry IV. All right? And so after many years of bickering and arguing and sort of harsh letters exchanged between the two, eventually Gregory said, fine, you are excommunicated. You are cut off from the sacraments of the church. The Pope doesn't have an army, but he does have this spiritual power to cut someone off from sacraments. And that's not that big a deal. But what happens if you are, if you are a king, the people beneath you in the hierarchy don't have to listen to you. That's the real problem. And so at a stroke, Henry IV lost control of Germany as his dukes and counts basically ignored him. And so Henry IV came down to seek forgiveness from the Pope. And in fact, at a papal palace at Canossa in the Alps, Henry sort of knelt in the snow for 3 days in front of the papal palace at Canossa. Eventually, the Pope saw him. The Pope, Henry, begged for forgiveness, and the Pope forgave him. Okay, and so, but that's just incredible how you have an emperor actually abasing himself before a pope like this. So Henry got his forgiveness. He went back to Germany. He put his house in order. He continued to name his bishops. Obviously, he wasn't really intending on fulfilling that promise. But I think the point is, I mean, it did not end the investiture controversy. It kept flaring up in Germany and in France and England as well. So anyone who says there was no separation of church and state in the Middle Ages doesn't really know what he's talking about. They're supposed to work in tandem with each other, obviously, but they are definitely separate institutions, and they are often at odds with each other. Here's some illustrations. Henry IV abasing himself before Gregory VII. And this took place at the papal palace of Canossa, and there's what it looks like today. Okay. I would say that the Gregorian reform movement was a bit of a missed opportunity. Some good did come out of it, as I say. They founded some universities. I think that, priests really weren't allowed to keep mistresses after this. Okay. The College of Cardinals was established. Again, the church will control the church. So how do you elect a new pope? Well, the College of Cardinals will take care of it. There are certain churchmen designated cardinals. And they get to wear a nifty red robe, which is why the bird is so named, because it's red. Okay, so when the pope dies, the cardinals gather in Rome and they elect a new pope. So you see, the church will control the church. They won't ask the emperor for help in selecting the pope, which is what happened from time to time when they couldn't agree. Okay, so that's something else that comes out of the Gregorian reform movement. But unfortunately, the papacy gets it into its head that nothing really can happen until the church is free, completely free from lay control. But that's really not going to happen, because no king is going to voluntarily relinquish power over his own church. Okay, so that ends the lesson, and I hope that this works.